Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, got some 2025 Dynasty buys. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Let's go. First player, Garrett Wilson. So I think we all know that Garrett Wilson is a very good, near elite wide receiver. He's not elite, but very good. He's consistently earned lots of targets throughout his career, and 2024 was actually his most efficient season. Now, this year, he played all 17 games. He's done that all 3 years of his career. So we like to see that. 101 catches, 1,104 yards, 7 touchdowns, 154 targets, 5.9 catches, and 64.9 yards per game. Career high in catches per game, more targets than 2022, fewer than 2023, but it's still 154 targets is a lot. It's very strong to earn this many targets, playing alongside Devontae Adams for most of the year and without, great quarterback play. Now, why do I like Garrett Wilson? Well, strong advanced stats, screwed by quarterback play again, and hopefully a better 2025 situation. So this year, Wilson, 26% target share, 34.5% air yard share, 17th and 15th among wide receivers, but 62.8% catchable target rate, 86th among wide receivers. Now, I really don't understand why Aaron Rodgers could not deliver to Garrett Wilson. It seemed like the chemistry was off for large portions of the year. There was that little middle period, like that 5 to 6 game period where it looked like things were going well. But this statistic shows that, if you're starting with 37% of the targets not being catchable at all, how much can the wide receiver really do? And he still caught 101 passes. I mean, it was a great year overall. Now, the 2025 Jets will likely move on without Rodgers and Adams. Now, I discovered something interesting today. Polymarket, an interesting thing, has all these prop markets, user prop markets for future events, some of which are sports. And, on there, I saw that there was a 92% chance that the Jets, that Aaron Rodgers would be not on the Jets. That's kind of how I feel. I don't see the Jets running it back with Aaron Rodgers. It hasn't worked. Why would you think it would work with someone who's 41 already? I don't think so. So I think that the situation is going to be better next year, even if it's a little unclear what better is going to be. Now, in terms of buying Garrett Wilson, I think, is treated as more of a maybe. People in Dynasty, they don't see him as a sure thing. A player who's earned 147 or more targets in every season is not a maybe. We know this is a good player. There's zero doubt. Garrett Wilson is a really good player. And we saw at times this year what that could have looked like. But he's not treated that way. Now, let me tell you this. Rookie picks rise in value over time. They do. That's going to be the same for this class. However, this class is not going to have sure things. Maybe there's one Ashton Genty, one sure thing. That's it. There's not going to be 5, let alone 6, 7, 8 like there were last year, people were thinking. So if you can get offers like this, 107 and 203 for Garrett Wilson, to buy Garrett Wilson at that price, I would do it. Or this, Kyle Pitts, 110 and 207. These are from the Dynasty Trade Database. All of these in this episode are. I didn't make up any of these offers. These are all from there. If you get this offer, you take Garrett Wilson. Yeah, you don't want to trade the picks because they'll rise in value, but they're not going to rise in value to the level of Garrett Wilson. That's not going to happen. So, if you get these types of offers, I would do it. And then another one, this last one I thought was interesting. Garrett Wilson and Patrick Mahomes for Joe Burrow and Derrick Henry. I think dynasty value-wise, going into the offseason, I'd rather have Mahomes and Wilson over Burrow and Henry in terms of dynasty value. So that's one maybe more creative and not just with picks that you could consider. Regardless, Garrett Wilson is a massive buy and someone I'll definitely be looking to add shares of this offseason. Next player, Trevor Lawrence. And Lawrence struggled in 2024, and it led to the Jaguars firing Doug Peterson. But there are reasons to look on the bright side for 2025 and beyond. I mean, look, Lawrence this year could have been better, right? I mean, 60.6% completion, not great. 7.2 yards per attempt. That's actually decent, but not special. 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. And 204.5 passing yards a game. Not great. 26 carries, 119 yards, 3 touchdowns. Didn't really deliver that much on the ground. But I will say the passing yards per game are slightly skewed by that final game where he left early after playing almost none of it. If we exclude that game where he did not play a full game, he averaged 222.7 passing yards a game. Still lower than the last 2 years. Not horrible. And we have to admit the accuracy did decline this year. It wasn't good. It was not a good year from Trevor Lawrence. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't good. So why do I have him as a dynasty buy then? Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Whether we like it or not, Trevor Lawrence is going to be the Jaguars starting quarterback for a long time. You know how we said this about Deshaun Watson, and now after 3 years of that contract, we're finally saying, oh, maybe they'll now be able to move on from Deshaun Watson. This contract is like that one, except we're 3 years earlier in it. Lawrence signed a 5-year, $275 million extension. That extension doesn't even kick in until 2026. 2025 is still the 5th-year option of his rookie deal. So he has a full no-trade clause, and through rolling guarantees, the Jaguars really cannot cut him until 2028. So they have 3 more years of Trevor Lawrence. Full no-trade clause, there's no way to get rid of him. So basically, 3 years, they're stuck with him. And, you know, it is what it is. And Lawrence has not been nearly as bad as Deshaun Watson has been in Cleveland. I mean, Lawrence has been, you know, league average starter, a little bit below over the last 3 years. Now, there will be a new head coach, of course, to replace Doug Peterson. And I think Doug Peterson came in 2022, upgrade over Urban Meyer, of course. But by the end of this, it kind of looked like it did in Philadelphia. It was good at start. And then Peterson kind of wore out his welcome. It didn't work. You know, offensive coordinator Press Taylor was not really helpful. He was a large part of the problem, I would say. And then we're going to have Brian Thomas. Now, Thomas was great all year, but his real ascension into being a complete alpha wide receiver one, that happened after he recovered from that injury he had in week 8. And then around week 11 or 12, he was kind of recovered from that. By that point, Lawrence barely played anymore. And I think that next year we're going to see Brian Thomas as the full alpha from the beginning. And that's going to help Trevor Lawrence next year. Additionally, Jaguars have $43.5 million in cap space plus extra draft capital. They can open up space by either cutting Christian Kirk or forcing him to take a pay cut to stay. They have extra 3rd, 4th, and 6th rounders, which they can use for trades to bring in a veteran, whatever they want to do. But they have a lot of ways to improve the roster. They're stuck with Gabe Davis. They're probably going to keep Evan Ingram. But they're going to bring in another wide receiver. It's not just going to be Christian Kirk on a pay cut, Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis, and Evan Ingram. They're going to bring in something else to add to that, either in place of Christian Kirk or in addition to /supplanting Christian Kirk. BTJ on a rookie deal, I mean, that gives them flexibility to add to the wide receiver room via free agency. I think they will be a player in free agency for one of, maybe not T. Higgins, but one of those next level down wide receivers. Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper. There are options. But regardless, they're going to improve this team somehow. Now, buying Trevor Lawrence. Now, I think that Lawrence is seen as like a middle quarterback in Superflex leagues, but he's still in that franchise value range for me. And there are some really bad deals. There were some that were so bad I didn't even include them. But this one, where you can get Trevor Lawrence and the 203 for David Montgomery in a Superflex league, I mean, that is insane to me. Trevor Lawrence is worth more than David Montgomery in Superflex. So I would smash this one. Trevor Lawrence for 110 in Superflex. There's not going to be a quarterback in this class that's going to be ranked above Trevor Lawrence in my dynasty ranks. That's almost impossible given the weakness of this class, let alone whatever 110 is. So, yeah, Trevor Lawrence clears here so easily. And then this combination, I mean, Terry McLaurin and Isaiah Pacheco, I don't hate the players, but McLaurin's almost 30 as a wide receiver. Isaiah Pacheco in danger of losing his job. I'd much rather have Trevor Lawrence in a Superflex league. It's not a decision for me. And these were, the last two were some of the better ones. Trevor Lawrence might be one of the biggest buy lows in Dynasty Superflex leagues of any player. So consider that, look at that in your leagues. And it's a safe asset to buy now. It's not like he's going to be replaced. So consider that. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon right now. 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You get my rankings, access to Discord, and ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month, $3 with a discount, and include all of that. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. I'm going to do a new one of those probably soon over the next couple of weeks, definitely in January, to describe what I'm offering on the Patreon during the off season. I will say, and I've said this in the comment section a zillion times, but the YouTube comment section is not a replacement for what I'm offering on the Patreon. If you're asking me Dynasty questions about your team, I'm just going to tell you to sign up for the Patreon and I'll answer those questions. I thought about turning the entire YouTube's comment section off. Honestly, it does nothing for the algorithm of the videos. It doesn't help. That's been proven. So, it is what it is. If you aren't interested in signing up for the Patreon, the only thing that matters is actually watching the YouTube videos. Liking doesn't matter. Comment doesn't matter. It's not like Twitter. So I appreciate everyone who watches the YouTube videos start to finish. I'm always going to appreciate that. But the comment section, it kind of is what it is. And it's mostly really a space for me to advertise the Patreon, because at the end of the day, if the Patreon doesn't succeed, the YouTube channel is not going to be here. It won't. It won't be here in 2 years if the Patreon doesn't be more successful than it is now. So that's just the reality of the situation. And, I'm hoping people sign up. But again, I'm not going to undercut myself by offering the same product I charge for free in the YouTube comments. That's not going to happen. And my business strategy about that's not going to change. So with that said, let's move into my last player. So my last player, Chris Olave, a bit out of sight, out of mind, I think. So that might make him a strong buy heading into 2025. This year, 32 catches, 400 yards, touchdown, 44 targets, 4 catches, and 50 yards a game. Now, I think if people just look at that, they're going to say, well, Olave was bad. But these numbers are misleading. They're misleading because they include 2 games where he played basically a few snaps and left for a concussion. Now, I get I hear you, what you're going to say. Well, I started Olave in those weeks. He crushed me for fantasy football. That's true. That's true that did occur. But, if I were in the business of being able to predict when players were going to leave in the middle of a game with a concussion, I would be betting on football and not here, helping and giving advice based on predicting things. I'd be betting on it. So we're not going to be able to predict ever when players are going to go out in the middle of games and get injured in the middle of games. We're not going to be able to do that. So even though it hurt you and it sucks, it's not predictive for the future. And I hope that we realize that. So if we look at the games that he actually finished, suddenly it doesn't look so bad. 30 catches, 382 yards, touchdown, 42 targets, 5 catches, and 63.7 yards a game. Now, basically identical to his pre-2024 stats. Slight drop-off, not much. Over 80 receiving yards in 4 of the 6 games. So he had 4 good games out of 6. He was what he was before 2024. Very good wide receiver. Stuck in a less than good offense with a meh quarterback. That's what he was. Nothing had really changed. Now, why do I have him as 2025 Dynasty buy? Well, concussion risk is overblown. He's still young and a proven target earner, like I said. So Olave was practicing in full by the end of the year. If those games mattered, if the games at the end of the year mattered, Olave would have played in them. I'm telling you, that's what would have happened. Just like Tua. Came back in 4 weeks from the concussion, even though people said that was crazy. That's never going to happen. That's exactly what happened. But there was no reason for him to come back because the Saints had already been eliminated from the playoffs at that stage, especially since Derek Carr was also hurt. There's really no reason for Olave to come back, right? I mean, the team did the right thing by not bringing him back in meaningless games. We hear this all the time from players who have a lot of concussions. Oh, they'll never return. Their career is over. I mean, we heard that with Brandon Cooks. Was Brandon Cooks' career over? No. We heard that with Tua. Was Tua's career over? No. They pretty much always return and continue their careers. It's very rare. Can you give me one example, of a player whose career was ended by concussions? It's very hard. I can't even think of one player. So I'm just going to assume that Olave is going to be back. He turns 25 in June. Not an old player. And he's earned significant targets throughout his career. Let's get into that. So, now that we get to the offseason, we're going to look a little bit at some stats from previous years when relevant. I think we look at that too much, going back multiple years. But in this case, I do think it's relevant. So Olave had a 26.7% target share and a 29.3% target rate in 2022 as a rookie, 15th and 10th among wide receivers that year. Then in 2023, 25.2% target share, 25.6% target rate, 17th and 18th among wide receivers that year. Did that despite having relatively lower snap shares for a wide receiver, extremely high air yards in 2023 with 38.2% share, 6th among wide receivers. Was he elite over the first 2 years? Probably not. He didn't come out and suddenly become elite this year. So is he going to be elite? No. But we know that Olave was very good. And very good players who are very good immediately and maintain it for the first 2 years of their career do not typically become bad or not good by 24 to 25 years old. That doesn't happen. So if that doesn't happen, then we have to think that Olave is going to come back and be relatively good. Now, in terms of buying him, there were a lot more complex deals, including Olave, where Olave wasn't the main piece. But I did see this one, Olave for 109. Again, nothing in this class at 109 is going to compare to Chris Olave. That's not possible. This class isn't good enough. There's not going to be a player there. So I would do this. For Mike Evans in 208, I like Mike Evans, but Mike Evans is 31 already. I am nervous about Mike Evans moving forward. I've been nervous for a long time. Maybe he'll continue beating the odds. Maybe not. I would take Olave here. You can probably do better than this, actually. And then Olave and Mac Jones for James Cook. I'd still rather have Olave. I mean, Olave's younger than Cook. And Cook ran really hot on touchdowns. Is that going to continue again? Maybe not. So I think I'd rather have the Olave side. But there were other deals where Olave was a piece of a larger deal. And I think that might even be a better way to acquire Olave. I just didn't want to focus on those because he wouldn't be the main piece in those deals. Now, we've got one piece of NFL news, and then we'll move on to one Patreon question. Raiders fire Antonio Pierce. That's the one coaching change that happened since my video on Monday, which you should watch, by the way. Pierce did well as an interim head coach, but seemed over his head at times in 2024. I think he was fine, but I think the Raiders could do better at the head coach spot. Pierce was not Gerard Mayo. Pierce was decent. I think a little not quite qualified for the job, given his past experience, but, we're going to see. The Raiders, hopefully they find an offensive mind, either as their head coach or offense coordinator and a new quarterback. Regardless, I think they're better off without Pierce. So I kind of like the move. And then I've got one Patreon question. I think it's interesting. How does playoff performance affect a player's dynasty value? Let's say Bo Nix wins the Super Bowl. Will his value skyrocket? I think it probably affects things more than it should, right? We saw with any island game that's important, whatever happens in that game affects players' dynasty values way more than it should. It is a good indicator of what teams will do when the stakes are at their highest. We saw this week with the Bucs season on the line, they suddenly relied on Bucky Irving more. But are the stakes at the highest during the regular season? Not always. The teams do what they would do when the stakes are the highest in every game? No. So I do factor them in like any other game. I think they have more of an impact than they should, but they're games. They're games that the teams are playing. So they are relevant. They are relevant, and there can be important takeaways. But yes, if Bo Nix wins the Super Bowl, which I don't think is going to happen, his value is probably going to skyrocket more than it should. But it would definitely affect his dynasty value. So that's kind of my answer to that. If you like the video, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Got Dynasty content year-round. Rookie content's coming up. 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. You can sign up in the top right corner, patreon.com/fantasy advice. Every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all